The Vietnamese government is supporting the fight against COVID-19 in multiple ways. During the COVID-19 pandemic, across Vietnam, the water utility companies assured safe access to clean water and sanitation, as well as sustained control of water quality.
Chúng tôi ý thức được cái vai trò rất là quan trọng của thiết yếu về cấp nước sạch đối với cái sức khỏe của người dân, đặc biệt là trong dịch bệnh. Đồng thời chúng tôi duy trì cấp nước an toàn, liên tục, năng lực cao và chất lượng nước tốt và dịch vụ hoàn hảo. Tất cả sự cố xảy ra thì chúng tôi đều đáp ứng rất là kịp thời. Và chúng tôi làm 4 cái buồng khử khuẩn tự động, và đồng thời chúng tôi cũng lấy cái công thức mà xả khuẩn đấy của từ hú đấy, thì chúng tôi chế 5.000 cái lít rửa tay tự động. Và đồng thời chúng tôi cũng cấp nước miễn phí, cấp cái nước uống đóng chai và bình miễn phí cho cả trung tâm là cách ly trên 10.000 người.
The COVID-19 pandemic put pressure on the need for speeding up the use of smart digital solutions in the water companies. In Hue, the water company used posters with simple messages to encourage people to use mobile payment for water services.
Chúng tôi luôn khuyến khích về cái thương mại điện tử. Huế có cô thì phải đi đầu. Từ năm 2015 chúng tôi đã làm hóa đơn điện tử rồi. Nhưng mà người khách hàng họ nhận thức cũng từng bước. Thì đến năm 2019 ấy, thì chỉ có 22%. Nhưng mà khi mà dịch bệnh ra thì chúng tôi định những cái thông tin đó, thì người khách hàng họ cũng ý thức rằng nếu mà tiếp xúc trực tiếp thì dễ có cái nguy cơ về gây bệnh tật. Thì chúng tôi cũng lợi dụng đấy, biến cái nguy cơ là thành thời cơ để chúng tôi nâng lên cái tỷ lệ thanh toán qua hóa đơn điện tử là 38%. Rất cảm ơn ADB đã cho chúng tôi là thứ nhất là đã viện trợ không hoàn lại cho chúng tôi quy hoạch một hệ thống cấp nước toàn tỉnh không phân biệt đô thị và nông thôn từ năm 2008.
Hue Water Utility Company has been working on safer water supply and better access to sanitation for the public for decades. With the assistance of an ADB loan, UWACO has been upgrading and expanding the provincial water supply system to ensure water security and safe water supply for over 95% of the province's population by 2020. The use of digital technology in Hue fits well with our approach to support client cities to enhance their planning, service delivery and financial management. We are fortunate to have partnered with the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade to establish the ASEAN Australia Smart Cities Trust Fund. The Trust Fund supports activities aligned with ADB Strategy 2030, its sustainable focus on livable cities, and the ASEAN Sustainable Urbanisation Strategy. Through the Trust Fund, we will continue to support smart city development in cities such as Hue across the Asia-Pacific region.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be. You are now here at ADB's first ever virtual Business Opportunities Outreach event. I'm Luke Fochman, part of ADB's procurement team, and I'll be your moderator over the course of the next 2 hours as we walk through today's content. Our event is split into 3 segments, the first of which is a panel, which has both industry speakers as well as ADB speakers, with the intent being to address COVID-19 at project implementation, as well as COVID-19 related opportunities. The second panel is all about PPFD on the spot. This will be your chance to learn about how we do procurement and how industry can engage directly with ADB under ADB finance projects. Our third segment for today is also a panel with SDCC. So SDCC, that's Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department. And they'll talk about Strategy 2030 and ADB's response to COVID-19 within health and other sectors as well. You know, I think it goes without saying that normally we would have such an event back in our headquarters in Manila, but with COVID-19, that simply is not an option these days. So our intent for this afternoon's event is to make it as engaging as it possibly can be. So we'll encourage you to input any questions you may have into the Zoom Q&A feature, not to be confused with the Zoom comments feature, Zoom Q&A. Okay, so again, the idea is to bring HQ to you. Ultimately, this event was prepared for our stakeholders in industry. So please do be as engaging as possible. In addition, some other kind of housekeeping things to cover. Today's session will be conducted in English without any translations. Today's session will be recorded. If you want to get the recording, just visit adb.org over the next couple of days, and that recording will be available. If you experience any technical issues, just log off and log back on, and hopefully those issues should be resolved. So before we get started with the main content for today's event, I just want to engage the Zoom polling feature that we have. So shortly, you should be seeing some questions that will come up. So Martin, if you could cue those Zoom polling questions now. There'll be a total of 6, and it's actually quite simple. All you need to do is input the response, which most accurately reflects your situation and reason for attending today's event. The intent here is to get to know our audience a little bit, and I'm seeing some comments here that it's a bit of an echo, and I think we finally got that resolved. But let's go ahead. We have our Zoom polling feature, and that's the first question. So it should go pretty quickly. I just want you to each input your response to this question right now. Here you go. So go ahead, please. Well, as you can see, the responses come in quite quickly. So I'll give you about 20 seconds to complete this. And it feels like a race. The responses are coming in so fast. Looks like a lot of consultancy firms today, individual consultants, some contractors, a few from business chambers. So a couple more seconds and we'll close this out. Okay, gonna end this poll. All right, I think everyone should now be able to see the results on their screens. Let's go ahead now to the second question. Well, everyone's jumping in on the same question. No need for that. I'm going to end this. We're having a slight challenge with the polling feature. Well, I think we won't dwell on this for much longer. It seems to not be functioning as planned, but the intent there was just to get a better sense for our audience to see which areas of the bank, what sectors you might be more interested in. But fortunately, we have such a good group of speakers today. I think we'll cover a lot of that anyway. So let's not dwell on the fact that the poll didn't work as planned, and let's go on to our full event. So here we go. to provide welcome remarks, I'd like to turn it over to our first speaker, Ms. Deborah Stokes, who is Vice President for Administration and Corporate Management, or VPAC, at ADB. She's held this position since January 2019. Prior to ADB, VP Stokes was Senior Official at Australia's Department for Foreign Affairs and Trade and the Australian Agency for International Development. She was most recently High Commissioner to Papua New Guinea and has served as Australia's Ambassador to Austria and Permanent Representative to the UN in Vienna, as well as also Deputy Head of Mission at the Australian Embassy in Tokyo. Okay, now over to VP Stokes for our welcome remarks.
Excellencies, ADB board members, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to ADB's first Digital Business Opportunity event. Today we have a diverse audience joining us from more than 60 countries, including consultants, contractors, suppliers, manufacturers, representatives from civil society and academia. We also have participants from a range of embassies and trade commissions. I would like to particularly acknowledge their efforts in promoting this event through their business outreach. I would like to thank all participants for your interest in doing business with ADB and our member countries. We rely on quality business partners to deliver development results on the ground. This reliance has not been changed by the COVID-19 pandemic. Indeed, we need to intensify our collaboration to respond speedily and effectively to the dual health and economic crises facing our developing member countries. Let me start by sharing with you how ADB swiftly stepped up its support to developing member countries in responding to the pandemic. Recognising the urgency, in April 2020, ADB announced a $20 billion package to address the immediate needs of its developing member countries as they responded to COVID-19. As part of the response, ADB has engaged with the international business community to connect with the global supply market for emergency medical products. We also facilitated emergency procurement of critical products for the most affected DMCs. More than $12 billion out of the approved $20 billion package has already been committed. Since March 2020, ADB undertook several procurement responses to support global efforts to combat the pandemic. We implemented a flexible and agile process for emergency procurement. We enhanced our hands-on operational procurement and logistics support for our developing member countries. We engaged in market research on critical medical goods and health expertise. We increased our support for electronic procurement in developing member countries. And we developed new guidance materials and conducted awareness sessions on the adoption of COVID-19 safe practices in project implementation. Furthermore, ADB made a conscious decision to go beyond its normal role in overseeing procurement by borrowers by undertaking its own direct procurement of critical medical supplies and other goods as an immediate response to the urgent needs of the developing member countries. Some examples of ADB's direct procurement include: by the end of the year, we expect to commit $45 million for the supply of personal protective equipment, testing kits, diagnostics equipment, lab reagents, and other critical items to fight the disease. This amount includes $18 million of procurement services being outsourced to UNICEF for the supply of critical equipment to 26 developing member countries. Also includes a $5 million rapid emergency supplies provision project that delivered critical food supplies to more than 150,000 of the most vulnerable households in Metro Manila and neighbouring provinces, areas hardest hit by the pandemic. A new reference laboratory in San Fernando City in the Philippines, funded by a $3 million grant from ADB's Asia Pacific Disaster Response Fund, which significantly increased the country's testing capacity. In addition, ADB is also providing counter-cyclical support as well as policy-based loans to support DMCs through this difficult period. And $1.8 billion has also been provided to the private sector to rejuvenate trade and supply chains. Looking ahead, we stand ready to support developing member countries with the rapid, safe, and equitable vaccine rollout. Despite the COVID-19 challenges, ADB continues to implement its Strategy 2030 with its major focus on green, climate resilient, inclusive growth, as well as gender equality and a greater role for private sector operations. Strategy 2030 recognises that our partners need more than finance. They want access to the best knowledge and technologies available to achieve quality and inclusive growth. A major hallmark of our Strategy 2030 is the vision of integrated multi-sector solutions to meet the differentiated and increasingly sophisticated needs of our developing member countries. The COVID-19 pandemic has only reinforced this. To achieve our Strategy 2030 ambitions, our partners need access to the best quality contractors and consultants, able to work across sectors and support integrated solutions. We will need partners to support us in developing differentiated approaches and providing customised solutions tailored to the specific local circumstances in each of our developing member countries. We will continue looking for skills and expertise to support gender equality and addressing climate change. We will be looking for suppliers and contractors who can provide quality and value for money goods, works and services by leveraging advanced technologies and innovation at every available opportunity. ADB highly values our collaboration with you to support our developing member countries in their responses to the COVID-19 pandemic and in building a better future for the people of Asia and the Pacific. I hope very much that you will find the information presented in this forum of assistance to you in doing business with ADB. We look forward to working closely with you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, VP Stokes, for those welcome remarks. Now our next speaker will provide introductory remarks. And our next speaker is none other than DG Risa Tang, who is Director General for the Procurement, Portfolio, and Financial Management Department here at ADB, where she provides leadership to our cross-functional teams. Prior to this role, she was the Principal Director for the Office of Administrative Services and has also served in management positions in operations and non-operations departments over the years. DG Tang has 24 years of comprehensive professional experience here at ADB. Over to you, DG.
Thank you, Vice President Stokes, members of the board, distinguished guests, and colleagues. Welcome to the very first digital ADB business outreach event for 2020. We are pleased to showcase opportunities for building a prosperous Asia and the Pacific. Over 1,000 people from 61 ADB members are attending today, thanks to the wonders of digital technology, which helps to maintain our outreach with the business community. Let me first share some statistics. In 2018, more than 7,900 contracts for a total of $13 billion were awarded under ADB project for procurement of goods, civil works, and consulting services. In 2019, it reached $15 billion. ADB is fully committed to the development of the region as we move forward. This event will focus on two themes. First, ADB's continued support to ongoing business activities during the pandemic using a flexible approach. And second, specific COVID-19 related opportunities to help bring our DMCs back on track. A high-level panel comprising both ADB colleagues and external partners from the water supply and the health sectors will discuss how ongoing ADB projects with support from ADB, consultants, and contractors have mainstreamed the mitigating measures to address the impact of COVID-19, and how this crisis is still creating new business opportunities for consultants, suppliers, and contractors on ADB-financed projects. PPFD experts will share how ADB is effectively supporting both ongoing operations and the new assistance tied to COVID-19. They will elaborate on new measures available to facilitate emergency procurement using a flexible and agile approach. There will also be a discussion on the enhanced support provided by ADB's team of procurement specialists, extending to market outreach, due diligence of manufacturers of critical medical products and equipment, and facilitation of contract negotiations and delivery of supplies. Based on requests from ADB constituencies, a comprehensive virtual BOS program has been prepared, which has already covered 18 countries with more than 1,600 participants between June and October this year. Another 4 are planned before the end of the year. Participant feedback from the BOS confirms it has been well received, considering it simplifies logistics, reduces carbon footprint, gathers more speakers, allows larger audiences, and offers customized technical contents based on business community demand. These BOS have created excellent lines of communication between ADB and the business community. Our enhanced website is our response to communicate more effectively with our stakeholders and business partners, such as yourselves. ADB is doing its utmost during the pandemic to support consultant and contractors' activities. Here are some of the measures taken. Project-related work continues as much as possible through virtual missions. Resident missions or our country offices are working closely with executing and implementing agencies on safe resumption of work at sites where possible, and a strong coordination with development partners facing similar challenges. Today, colleagues from the sector groups of the Sustainable Development and the Climate Change Department will update us on the implementation progress of ADB Strategy 2030 and ADB operations in the context of COVID-19 across the transport, energy, education, health, urban, and water sectors. Let us end the day with a productive and exciting Q&A session. Please forward your questions via this platform to the moderator ahead of time. Let us use this session not only for questions, but also an exchange of ideas, good practices, and lessons learned. Finally, please give us your feedback, which is always so critical for us to plan and design future events. ADB colleagues will share the live survey tool that is available on the platform. In closing, let me say, there are challenges and uncertainties for sure, but at the same time, there are also unlimited opportunities. I firmly believe with your interest and support, we can improve the lives of millions living in Asia and the Pacific. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, DG Tang. Now for our first panel, which will discuss the ADB's addressing of COVID-19 at project implementation, as well as COVID-19 related business opportunities. As I said before, we have 3 speakers from ADB, as well as 3 speakers from industry stakeholders and other entities. So our first speaker at ADB is Mr. Ramesh Subramaniam, who's Director General for ADB's Southeast Asia Regional Department. He oversees ADB's relationships and public sector work in all countries belonging to ASEAN, and also ADB's support to all sub-regional cooperation initiatives in the region. Ramesh has been with ADB for over 20 years. Next, ADB panelist is Mr. Jeff Taylor, who is Director of Procurement Division 1, which oversees procurement operations in Central, West, and South Asia. Jeff has been working in public procurement for infrastructure projects for 32 years, the last 12 of which have been at ADB. And our third panelist on the ADB side is Mr. Rustam Abdukayamov, who is Director of Procurement Division 2. His division covers procurement operations in East Asia, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific. Rustam has held various procurement roles at ADB in his nearly 20 years with the bank. So please join me in welcoming our three ADB panelists. In addition, we have, from industry and other areas, we have Mr. Taksim Khan, who is Managing Director and CEO at Dhaka Water Supply and Sewerage Authority, Dhaka Wasa, which of course is in Bangladesh. He has held this position for 10 years, during which he has converted a struggling organization into a profitable, environmentally friendly, sustainable, and pro-people public sector water utility. Welcome, Taksim. We also have Ms. Rehana Mohideen, who is Principal Advisor at the Nasal Institute for Global Health at the University of Melbourne. In this role, Ms. Mohideen is working on a project to strengthen urban resilience based on integrating infrastructure, energy, and health systems, drawing on the emerging lessons from COVID-19 response strategies with a focus on global e-sustainability initiatives. She has worked as an international development specialist for more than 10 years and has always maintained good, strong ties with ADB. Welcome, Rehana. Last and certainly not least, we have Ms. Annalise Avril. With 25 years of experience in the water industry, Ms. Avril is Group Senior Vice President, Research, Innovation, and Digital Transformation at Suez, Suez being the largest private water provider in the world. She has worked in different operational functions within the Suez Group, including Regional Operations Manager in France, Performance and Innovation Manager in Perth, Australia, as well as CEO of Suez Consulting. Annalise is also Vice President of the French National Strategic Council for the water industry, a board member of the French Development Agency, and Vice President of the IFI's Council of MEDEF International. Thank you for joining me and welcoming our panelists this afternoon. So as I said in the opening, we're going to have, of course, a lot of good discussions with the panelists here, but we invite questions from the audience. But don't use the comments feature in Zoom, use the Q&A feature. It's there in the middle of the screen at the bottom. Just type in your question and I'll try to get it addressed by the panelists. So first and foremost, I'd like to start with our ADB participants. Ramesh, from an ADB perspective, what have been the main challenges in recent months within the region?
Thanks so much, Luke. First of all, thanks to your department for organizing this Business Opportunities Forum. In these circumstances, it's fantastic to see that over 800 participants are now listening to us. Let me speak a little bit about the challenges, but I also want to look at solutions. And I think at the outset, there is a lot of gloom and doom. I do want to recognize and appreciate the phenomenal work that is being done across all the countries in our region. The developing member countries of ADB have been exerting a lot of efforts, a lot of new policy frameworks, spending priorities have been put in place. So we do want to acknowledge all the fantastic work being done. Now, if we look at what is the problem, if I define the core problem, you've got obviously health and you've got the economics problem. And countries are trying their best to ensure that this does not lead to a massive financial or a balance of payments problem. Now, most of us, I think all of us have seen economic crisis, we've seen natural disasters, but nothing of the type that we are facing. There is severe revenue compression across the board, across all our countries. Public revenues have declined considerably because economic activity has declined. You've got serious job losses. Millions of people have lost their jobs. There has been a major reversal of gains made in poverty reduction. As a result, if you look across the Asia-Pacific region, real GDP is going to contract. ADB's forecast is negative 0.7%. And if you look at Southeast Asia, that figure is even a more worrisome negative 3.8%. South Asia is even more worrisome at negative about 6.8%. Now, in this context, clearly these are unusual problems and countries do need unusual solutions. I think at the same time, as I mentioned at the outset, developing member countries are putting in place solutions to make sure that the opportunities that are posed by the crisis are not wasted. And we, on the part of ADB, been very pleased to be able to provide support. Now, what are some of the guiding principles? Let me look more at some of the positive features or issues that we are seeing as well. First and foremost, countries are looking at ensuring population well-being. If you look at the recent ADB Asian Development Outlook, the focus is on wellness. It is the September 2020 update. Now, the good news is the member countries or all economies in general are now able to address the trade-off between flattening the pandemic curve and the flattening the recession curve. That trade-off, which is quite difficult at the beginning of the pandemic, that is now being addressed. However, there is also clear recognition that the post-pandemic recovery is going to be much longer than what we thought even a few months earlier. Take, for instance, tourism, which has been a major revenue earner in many of our countries in Southeast Asia. Clearly, you've got both demand and supply side factors affecting the recovery in tourism sector. Manufacturing, not all enterprises are going to be able to survive. So we do need new tools, new solutions to deal with these problems, which is what countries are looking at. And if you look at ADB's approach for population well-being, we provided significant grants initially, as well as we provided immediate loans, concessional loan support in many countries to provide greater capacity for testing, tracing, and treatment. And also shoring health sector capacity in a number of countries across the region. Social protection has been another major area where ADB has provided significant support. And in parallel is the need to focus on economic well-being or economic recovery. Here, through the CPRO, the COVID response packages that ADB has come up with, we provided substantial support in Southeast Asia alone, which is a part I cover for ADB. The board has approved close to $6.5 billion of support. So this is quite significant within a short span of time. And the support that we are providing or looking at key sectors of the economy. Last point I wanted to make, Luke, is that clearly, given these unprecedented times, countries also need new delivery mechanisms and new solutions to make sure that all this money hits and goes to the right people. And here, the procurement colleagues and financial management colleagues, our sector colleagues will be participating later in the sessions. They've been doing a phenomenal amount of work. The one ADB spirit, as we call, has come really, truly alive. Let me take a pause there, Luke. I'll be happy to respond to any questions later.
Okay. Thanks, Ramesh. Appreciate that comprehensive response. Okay, perhaps let's get some input from one of our colleagues outside of ADB. So over to you, Rihanna. As a health consultant working proactively, mitigating the impact of COVID-19, could you share your views on the challenges and, importantly, also the priorities on what needs to be done?
Thank you, Luke. And I'd also like to thank the Asian Development Bank and your department for inviting the Nozzle Institute to attend this event. Well, the COVID-19 pandemic has demonstrated more clearly than before the interrelatedness and interconnections between physical infrastructure, key utilities and services, and economic and social functions. Health status is a key indicator and product of this interaction, particularly the health of vulnerable communities, such as the poor, women and children, the elderly, and those with disabilities, and so on. And there's an urgent need to rethink and transform cities to respond to the reality of COVID-19 and potential future pandemics, to recover better by building more resilient, inclusive, and sustainable cities. And international experiences also show that cities with similar densities and levels of economic development have fared very differently in their ability to contain the pandemic. This indicates that the strength and duration of impacts are not solely determined by a city's population density, but by local capacity and preparedness to deal with such crises, infrastructure and service delivery systems, and the level of functional responsibilities and resources available to them through city-level solutions, decentralized systems, if you like.
Okay, Rihanna, thank you for that. Now, as we kind of move around the circle and invite input from different colleagues, perhaps now let's get a bit from procurement. So Rustam, firstly, just so the audience is aware, what support to DMCs has ADB provided after the pandemic was declared earlier this year?
Thank you, Luke, and good day to all our participants. In fact, if we are going to talk about ADB's support, after the declaration of pandemic by the World Health Organization, ADB has started several initiatives which were done in parallel. So the first which comes to our mind is the technical assistance of 48 million, which was provided to finance urgently needed medical supplies for our countries. And of course, there was a one ADB team established to work on the COVID-19 response. Then in April, ADB announced a 20 billion support package to respond to the pandemic, and this package is being now disbursed to different countries, and they have their own programs on how to utilize this money. Then very important exercise which was done by our regional departments, resident missions, our procurement department, jointly with our recipient countries, was assessment of the country's needs for critical medical supplies like PPEs, ventilators, testing kits, reagents, X-ray machines, and also to undertake market research to determine manufacturers and suppliers of these items. So this was quite a bit challenge because, of course, the demand was huge. There were a lot of restrictions within the manufacturing countries to export that, and that created additional big challenge for all of us. Then we have also coordinated with the UN agencies and freight forwarders on the logistics for delivery and the distribution of these medical supplies. So this was another challenge because of travel restrictions, flights were cancelled, there were quite a lot of problems on even after finding the manufacturers how to ship all these medical supplies to different recipient countries. But we also engaged with the UN agencies in order for them to basically facilitate procurement and distribution of these medical supplies, and this support is still ongoing. We know that most of the orders which were placed have already reached their final destinations, and we hope that everything which was planned will be delivered by December. And another few 2 points which I wanted to highlight was a direct procurement by ADB of a testing laboratory for the Philippines. This was a very big effort because it required close coordination with the health authorities and the Philippine Air Force, which had to arrange a special military aircraft to bring this laboratory and personnel to install it in one of the hospitals in San Fernando. And another very big, I think, and very useful intervention from ADB was direct procurement of food supplies for most vulnerable population in Metro Manila and the neighboring provinces which were under a lockdown. They could not travel, they could not go to the markets, and this was a very big challenge for them. But we had to coordinate with the government authorities first to identify manufacturers, because many manufacturers were also under lockdown. We had ensure that the quality of these food products is acceptable, so there are no health risks. Then we had to arrange the packaging of these into smaller units so that these could be distributed to communities. And we would like to thank all the government agencies involved and also the Philippine Army, which provided actually military trucks, convoy, and basically escorted all these supplies to different destinations. So this was quite a big effort. Maybe this was more of kind of emergency response, but a lot still is going on, and we will be discussing about that later on. So thank you. Okay.
Thanks, Rustam. I think you said it well. The supply chain challenges brought on by COVID-19 truly are just unprecedented. Thanks for sharing. Perhaps a bit more input from ADB Procurement. Turning it now to Jeff. So in addition to supporting DMCs in procurement of urgently needed medical supplies, any other areas of support that ADB has provided to mitigate the impact of COVID-19?
Yeah, thank you very much, Luke, and welcome everybody. Yes, we have to have a look at how it's going to impact upon ADB's operations beyond the confines of just the medical needs. One of the things we recognised very early is contracts were potentially going to get frustrated. So back in February, we came out with guidance on force majeure and the impact that COVID could potentially have on construction contracts, supply contracts, and consulting contracts. We also streamlined the procurement procedures for our borrowers in terms of contracting the resources needed to respond to the pandemic. So introduced some emergency procurement procedures, keeping ADB's key points of review, but speeding up the process by which critically needed items, equipment, and expertise could be procured. We also then took a look at the health and safety provisions in existing contracts and consulted with WHO, the UN agencies, and health experts to actually put mitigation measures in our construction contracts. As most of the audience probably know, the majority of ADB's operations are actually implemented through construction. So we felt it was critically important that we recognize the risk that COVID presented to this and put in the appropriate mitigation measures. And that was working in partnership with our Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department and our social safeguards teams that actually put in health and safety as a cornerstone of what within ADB's operations. Over.
Okay. Well, thanks, Jeff. That's very helpful. It's, other than just procuring and delivering supplies, a lot has been done in terms of our normal implementation work that ADB does. Appreciate you sharing that. We actually had a live question come in, and maybe either yourself or Rustam could address it. So I think it's probably pertinent for different suppliers out there that have dialed in. But so as a firm supplying different types of medical supplies, how could such an organization get involved with ADB or our borrowers to supply needed goods for COVID-19 related response?
I would direct you to our ADB response to COVID-19, which invites potential suppliers, consultants and contractors to register their qualifications and interest on ADB's website.
That's it. Yeah, there's an ongoing EOI for COVID-related supplies on adb.org. It's pretty easy to find. It's linked to the PPFD webpage. So please do go there and you'll find it. Just register your interest there. Okay. Thanks, Jeff. I now want to turn it over to one of our partners outside of ADB. So for Taksim Khan, you're managing one of the largest water utilities in Asia. It's operating several existing facilities, but there's also construction going on for new facilities. Could you tell us how COVID-19 health and safety measures are being observed within your organization? Over to you, Taksim. I think you might be on mute, sir.
Oh, I'm extremely sorry. I'm sorry. Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak here today. It's a wonderful arrangement, and we always appreciate the support that ADB is providing in our water sector, especially in Bangladesh, in Dhaka. Dhaka Wasa has a wonderful relationship with ADB in the water sector. As you can see, there is a two-part. First of all, as we all know, that every country like Bangladesh went for total lockdown in the month of April and May. It's the end of March. So there, our first challenge was because the people cannot survive with water. Although we were in lockdown, but water supply had to be continued, and that's the reason why we got 15 days to take a preparedness. Because first COVID case was being detected in Dhaka, that was on the 8th of March, and we went for lockdown on the 26th of March. So this is the time when we took extensive preparedness, which helped us to do the work later on. Especially our medical team make an extensive awareness program with our people, those who are working. So what happened, we made some special arrangement, like as we have to work 24/7, and we work for 24/7, and especially the treatment plants, we have a very big 2 treatment plants, those who are on function. And what we did, we made all the people confined inside the treatment plant for 2 months, or almost 2 months, And everything was being provided by Dhaka Wasa, including the food and other things, and nobody went out and nobody came in except for going marketing and other things, and which also strictly followed the health and safety rule. So that has helped us in continuing our operation and maintenance. And that's also, we continue our inside Dhaka city repair maintenance work, and all the people, those who are working, who have been asked to be their working place to be isolated. So except them, there were nobody in the working place. And no one had been allowed to be 2% together and strictly followed that 6 feet distance and other things. So that helped us. And at the grace of Almighty, there was no water shortage in that lockdown period. And in fact, we had a more use of water because of the hand wash practices. And also we had made a lot of hand wash establishments throughout the city. Also disinfect the streets of the city, and these are other programs that we do have. So at the end of the day, what we found that there was no interruption of water supply. This is one part. So that is but at the same time, as you already mentioned, that we had a lot of construction and development works were going on. And obviously, first 2 months when it was locked down, there were no work. But later on, the government has also decided that we should save the life and the livelihood. And that is the reason why government also wanted to have small businesses to be started and work. So what we did, we consulted with all the contractors, and some of the contractors we provided, and most of the contractors, they provided the safety measures to their workers, and they started working. Especially, we got a lot of good supplies from one of our development partners, and as well as those development partners also helped the contractors to start the work. And first, those who were foreign funded, and then of course the foreign funded contractors had a problem, but local contractors started first. But later, we have a contractor from China, we have a contractor from French, Suez, and Veolia. So they also started working. So nowadays, we have a normal working going on, and we are providing full support, and almost I would say, we can be supporting the visa issues and other issues which were really problems at that moment, but we try to support that also.
Okay. Thanks, Taksim. Appreciate that. And I kind of would like to continue this discussion thread around kind of safety and different implementation measures that were put in place at facilities. And so, Annalise, you're also working in the water sector, in fact, for one of the largest private water providers in the world. Could you share your views on your company and how the private sector in general complies with these additional health and safety measures during construction, but also in operational phases? What are the challenges and what are the potential solutions?
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be with you today. We're definitely going through a challenging time. I'm speaking from Paris today, and we're just about to switch to a full global lockdown mode again tonight. So we're not out of it yet. From a stress perspective, I would say that we've had 3 specific challenges. One is the scale, the second is the duration, the third is the unknown. Coming to the scale, you said we're a global company. We are used to managing crises like earthquakes, tsunamis, even pandemic when Ebola hit West Africa. But this time, on this occasion, we had to manage a crisis in all our countries of operations almost at the same time. And what we are used to doing, like flying some people, rely on suppliers or team members or experts from other countries to support a country that has been impacted by a crisis, we could not do that. Because everyone was in the same boat. So it was quite challenging, although of course there was a nice opportunity to learn what has been done in one country and do that, duplicate that to another. The second one is the duration. We've implemented business continuity plans for operations, for our project, design and build project, as you said, but over an exceptionally long period of time. And of course, this raises issues like employees' fatigue or morale, accented based on the fact that on many occasions we made the choice to actually keep our people safe and arrange for temporary accommodation on the site of a project or our plants or facilities. But of course, it prevents them from being infected from the outside, but also it means that they are quite isolated. And so from a support perspective, we have to do some specific things to keep them connected to the outside world and support them, because it's quite long. And from an operational perspective as well, it means that in the first place, we made the choice to defer, to postpone some activities or to review our project plans. But of course, things can be deferred or postponed like for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 1 month, but not many months. So that was another challenge as well. And the third one, as I said, is the unknown. We know what an earthquake is, as I said, but this virus was quite new. We didn't know how long it would remain infectious, for instance, in wastewater, in sludge, on various materials. So to keep our people safe and to protect the community as well, we had to take conservative measures and preventative measures based on our best guess, I would say. And it was quite challenging to do some risk job assessment without really having a rock solid scientific knowledge on this virus. But we had to do that, all these job assessment and PPE policy reviews, and also find some ways from an operational perspective to secure some things like sludge disposal, because we didn't know if they were sanitized or if they were still infectious. So many questions that we are in the process to answer, but we don't have all the answers yet.
Okay. Well, thanks, Annalise. Appreciate you sharing that. It does sound like a very complicated list of issues, but you quite articulated them for the group, so it's appreciated. A couple questions came in from the audience I think it'd be interesting to perhaps raise right now. And for Ramesh, I think they perhaps might most impact your region. So tourism and the hospitality industry has indeed suffered heavily from COVID-19. And of course, the revival of tourism could be the savior for different countries that are kind of reliant on tourism for GDP growth and the like. Could you talk about any special opportunities for the tourism sector within Southeast Asia or any Asian region at all within the bank?
Sure, it's a very critical issue, Luke. If you look at Southeast Asia, average contribution of tourism to GDP on an average basis, it's about 12% or so. Take some countries like Thailand, where that ratio can be 20%, Cambodia 17%, Philippines also very high, about 12% or so. If you added also informal other sectors, ancillary sectors which are related to tourism. So what can be done? Out of the 20 billion package that Rustam mentioned, for instance, ADB, from ADB's point of view, more than half of it has been committed and the resources are available. Just for Southeast Asia, we have $5 billion that has been made available. Much of that is going for social protection, immediate health support, social protection, as well as micro, small enterprise revival. Micro and small enterprises play a major role in the tourism sector. You take Philippines, you take Thailand, you take Indonesia, any country. We are working with, for example, the Pacific Asia Travel Association, the PATA, the IATA together, as well as in the Greater Mekong sub-region. There is a pretty vibrant tourism working group. All these have come together working with ADB in brainstorming and finding solutions, working of course closely with the countries. A couple of things that we are working with some of the countries are on looking at the concept of tourism bubbles, like what has been tried out or looked at in Europe. In Australia, it's being looked at. So in the Greater Mekong sub-region, we are looking at it. As part of that, we also need to look at health protocols, clearly to visitors who will be coming, that it is safe, and that there are proper procedures in place in terms of allowing visitors to come in. And also citizens of the countries need to be given that comfort as well. And the third area, concrete area of support, is informal sector workers. Now, these cannot be tracked, but they do need to be identified, and adequate support needs to be provided, because this is a sector which will take at least about 2 to 3 years for recovery. just last point, ADB used to have a program in the Philippines called the Job Start program. We are discussing with the government if that can be revived because that program used to be a major source of support, particularly for the tourism industry. So we are looking at programs of that nature in other countries as well, including, for instance, in South Asia and other parts of the region. Let me pause there, Luke.
Appreciate that, Ramesh. And maybe you're the right guy to answer the second question that came in from the audience as well. So it's about the Philippines. And the question is, with the Philippines poverty line at around 16%, how can ADB assist in addressing one of the country's major problems, considering the constraints brought by COVID-19?
Yeah, this is obviously another major challenge. I mentioned poverty and job losses. The region has made fantastic gains. Look at Philippines, phenomenal progress made in the last, particularly about 4 or 5 years or so. Same as the case in Indonesia. So it is a major challenge. If you look at, since the question here is on the Philippines, we are quite happy that the Bayanihan to Heal as One Act has provided substantial support. And out of the ADB assistance, a significant part of that is being utilized for providing cash assistance. In addition to the larger program that ADB has provided for 1.5 billion US dollars, we've also given additional targeted support for emergency cash assistance for about 200 million. Now, the Philippine government has also had a very successful, the 4P program, which right now they're looking at because it's got health as well as education related measures. Health related measures could be applied now, but education, because physical learning is going to be a challenge, the government is considering how they can revive the education part of the 4P program, and we are working with the government. Our board has approved a substantial assistance package of $500 million over and above the 2 packages that I mentioned. But in addition to all of these, clearly at the country level, whether it's Philippines, Indonesia, India, Bangladesh, any country that you take, substantial amount of work is being done out of their stimulus packages. The micro and small enterprise support has been a key part of most of the packages. Reskilling and making sure that the people who are losing jobs, they do find alternative sources of employment. It's going to be another major issue that we need to focus. Finally, I'll borrow a term which Raghuram Rajan, the former IMF chief economist, now at the University of Chicago, referred to in a panel that we organized recently. That is a 3R approach, that is repair, recover and reform, which is what countries need to do in order to address the issues that we are facing, whether it's poverty reduction or economic revival across the sectors. So a lot needs to be done. I think countries are moving in the right track. A lot of sectors are going to reshape themselves. So it's going to be a continuous process, Luke. Let me pause there.
Okay. Thanks, Ramesh. Very comprehensive answers to both questions, and they are appreciated. Now, I'd like to do this. I think those first round of questions were extremely targeted, very specific. And now I want to give our panelists the opportunity for a bit more of an open-ended question. So here's the question, and Rehana, I want to call on you first to answer it. So what are the lessons and the near-term future perspectives? Rehana, over to you.
Well, the international situation is still very fluid, but there are some key lessons for recovery and building back better that are emerging. And just to run through a few very quickly, and the importance of an effective health response from surveillance systems, public health systems, public communication, referral hospitals, and so on, and the importance of building, preparing before a threat, so that you build into these systems and facilities the ability to adapt. I think this is an important lesson that's emerging. Urban and regional planning, reduced distance from home to work, land use to regulate hygiene conditions, significantly scaling up the low-carbon energy transition, access to key utilities for poor and vulnerable groups. The lack of access magnifies threats, social protection, rethinking business supply chains. I think this has become a very important issue. A poor understanding and regulation of how value chains work exposes population to existing and novel health threats and has also major economic implications. More resilient and inclusive ICT and digital technology, and generally technological access. Gender equality and social inclusion, which includes just disaggregated data around gender and exclusion, violence against women, frontline and service workers, predominantly women, and so on, and innovation. Innovation, that is the capacity to respond and adapt innovatively to these relatively new and newer threats, is a really critical thing. And one of the key aspects in the health sphere here is the One Health concept. And this is a key part of the program from NOSO. One Health as a collaborative, multi-sectoral and transdisciplinary approach, working at local, regional, national and global levels to achieve optimal health and well-being outcomes. That's sort of a rough definition, if you like, of One Health. I don't have a lot of time to go into it here, but I'll leave it there. Okay. So it's an integrated One Health concept.
Okay. Well, good. Thanks for that, Rehanna, and appreciate your perspective. There is a lot to discuss and perhaps not enough time for it. Okay, so now maybe same question, just it is open-ended. What are the lessons and near future perspectives? Rustam, if you could give us your insights into this, please.
Yeah, thank you, Luke. I think the lessons which we learned is there are a lot of unknown things because of the scope of that pandemic, and we are all learning by doing. So we really appreciate collaboration of our regional departments, UN agencies, and we're also coordinating with other multilateral development banks. But moving forward, I think what we have to understand, this was just emergency response, which is probably reaching its end, but the work will continue. We have so many projects ongoing, and we have to make sure that because they were affected by COVID and there were delays, they eventually should catch up to deliver all the intended benefits. So we have to focus on that. At the same time, since the pandemic, there were many new projects approved, and mostly focusing on the health sector improvements, on building capacity of local institutions to improve their resiliency, and that work will also continue. So I think there will be plenty of work for all of us to continue with the procurement support, with the consultant input. So I think that would be our kind of agenda for next 12 to 18 months. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Rustam. Appreciate that. Maybe some input now from the private sector. So Annalise, same question as before. So what are the lessons and the near-term future perspectives? Over to you, please.
Well, I think this pandemic has created a massive disruption, and there's a case for change, to be more resilient, as it has been just said, and really to go digital, as we are doing today. And it's the way we could actually really increase our resilience. I mentioned the fact, for instance, that it was quite difficult for us to fly in experts or people to provide some support to local operations or local projects. Now we have to do remote and digital technical assistance activities, thanks to virtual reality, all these digital tools that help really to support remote operations. It doesn't have to be that sophisticated. I really think that using some artificial intelligence tools or whatever, we can really develop some robust and cost-efficient tools to support remote activities, remote operations, remote relations to our customers as well in many industries. And I think also there's another opportunity which is related to health and environment. We see that we've got a very close link here and some emerging risks related to that. So I think that developing a better knowledge detection tool, online monitoring tool for all these emerging pollutants, emerging risks is really a way forward as well.
Okay, all right. Thanks for that, Annalise. So here we go. We've had actually various questions come into the chat feature, and we're actually going to save those for the next section. Before we go into the next section, which of course is PPFD on the spot, it's all about procurement, it's how to do business with ADB and our engagement with industry, we're going to play a short video to demonstrate our support in respect to COVID-19 in the Philippines. Please cue the video.
really don't know how long this will last. We hope it will be over very shortly. But during the meantime, we really need to help poor people with income, which is low for the Philippines. So we decided to provide assistance, to provide necessity of food and other things for the people to feel comfortable for the next couple of weeks.
The trucks lineup are for those will be used to transport these relief goods to areas. Actually, yung target beneficiaries natin, we consulted with the SWD. Those far-flung areas na mahirap nila marating, yun ang target ng relief goods natin, donated by ADB. So we will see to it that there's no duplication, and we will really maximize itong donation ng ADB.
Salamat na lang po kami, mayroon pang mga nagbigay po ng mga ng relief food, kaya sa awa ng Diyos din po, nakaahon din po sa hirap, crisis po.
Okay, welcome back everyone. We hope you enjoyed that video around our support in the Philippines. As mentioned, this segment is called PPFD on the Spot. It's all about procurement. And our first speaker today will talk about our virtual business opportunities seminars so far in 2020, the principles for them, and also the first learnings. His name is Stefan Basati. He's a procurement specialist, senior supporting design and procurement under infrastructure projects in East Asia, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific. He leads on innovative water and wastewater practices and technologies from the water service industry. He has 3 years of experience at ADB, but before that worked for 15 years with private water companies. Over to you, Stefan.
Thank you, Luke, and good morning and good afternoon to everyone. It is my pleasure to open this PPFD session. So I will cover 3 main topics in my presentation. First, I will detail, as you mentioned, a little bit more what are virtual business opportunity seminars as developed by ADB in 2020. Second, what are their contents and new features? And thirdly, what are the first learnings that we can get so far from this experience? So, as the audience know, our ADB is usually connecting by meeting physically since 10 years with contractors, companies, consultants, manufacturers, suppliers, and civil society in Manila as a forum in order to share our opportunities and projects. Business opportunity events were also held worldwide physically. And these forums were a good opportunity for interested parties to network with ADB staff and learn about business opportunities with ADB. So Luke, you can maybe play my first slide, please. So since the COVID-19 pandemic, ADB decided to continue to develop its engagement with suppliers, communities, and other interested parties, and to conduct in 2020 such BOS virtually, including the present events. Also, ADB has decided to develop new ADB business opportunity outreach website to provide more information and describe opportunities available under projects. ADB has communicated with each ADB member and organized a series of virtual events that are ongoing as of today, and the demand has been strong for such events, with 18 sessions held so far in 3 months and more than 8,800 participants so far without counting the present events. We have also decided to develop a new website that will be presented after by my colleague. So regarding the content of such events, we run in general 2 hours long events to address host organization demand on procurement topics delivered by PPFD staff, but we have also a diversity of demand on technical topics that are part of ADB 2030 strategy, as water, energy, urban, health, fintech, climate change, private sector, PPP. We added also a special part of the event to discuss how ADB has organized to support countries against COVID-19 pandemics and how it has impacted its sector strategy. This is what will be presented after by my colleague. My third and last point is related to what has been the learning so far. So what we saw is that there is a solid demand in the context for new opportunities, as the economic situation is difficult to forecast. So companies want to understand how to procurement procedure and how ADB works and how to access to opportunities and bring technology and innovation in a complex context where remote solution and new health and safety procedure are needed. Large, but also small and medium-sized company wants to understand how to intervene in project cycle. They are also interested to develop and demonstrate their technology in pilot. So in a depressed economic context worldwide, it is very important for many companies and consulting firms and other organizations to understand that ADB projects are running with adapted and simplified procedure and that new opportunities are here with more than ever needs of technology and new approaches. So when it comes to new ADB procurement principle introduced recently as quality and value for money, companies and consultants are also very interested to understand how it changes the way they can win projects, as the focus is placed on the technical criteria to better select quality and ensure sustainability of projects and infrastructure on the long term, with introduction of O&M performance to improve ownership and also sustainable asset management. So let's continue this PPFD session with a presentation on procurement procedure done by my colleague Charlene, followed by the new website presentation to really explain how we are dedicated to continue to communicate with you in this context. Thank you, and over to you, Luc.
Thanks, Stefan. Appreciate that, and some very impressive participation numbers so far this year with the virtual events. So as Stefan said, the next segment for this session right now is all about doing business with ADB and the ADB procurement system in COVID-19 context. Our speaker for this section is Ms. Charlene Shillingford-McClellan, who is a senior procurement specialist at ADB. Before joining the bank, she headed the East Caribbean Technical Mission to the European Union in Belgium, was fiduciary procurement specialist at the Inter-American Development Bank, and served on the Caribbean community as deputy program manager, focused on government procurement reform. Okay, turning it over to you, Charlene, to walk us through this next part of the event. Please cue the slides.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you all for joining us today and for staying. Can you hear me very clearly? Is it better now? Okay. Okay, wonderful. Over the next few minutes, I will be taking you through a short presentation in two main parts. Next slide, please. First, I will take you through a section on doing business with ADB, and second, on our procurement system in the COVID-19 context. I will end my presentation by sharing a few snapshots from our COVID-19 webpage, which my colleague Julian will then detail and demonstrate in the following presentation. Next slide, please. Great. The main lending instruments of the Asian Development Bank are loans and grants, technical assistance, equity, and guarantees, which are delivered through ordinary financing, concessional financing, and also through co-financing. In addition, the bank provides policy advice, knowledge, and capacity development. A quick glance at 2019 operations data reveals 3 billion in private sector commitments, 18.6 billion in public sector project approvals, and what you do not see featured here in this slide is the 2019 co-financing, which includes sovereign and non-sovereign and trust funds for a subtotal of 11.86 billion. These figures altogether give us the 33.74 billion 2019 ADB operations total. Next slide, please. Great. Observe in the left column of this slide the increasing trend in ADB active portfolio. It's currently at 105 billion in 2020, and this has been growing steadily. You can observe that the private sector portfolio almost doubled from 2014 to 2020. In fact, we can assume that it will be more than double when this data will be updated following the year's end. On the right of this slide, you will observe some 2019 contract data points. Goods and civil works saw 3,800 contracts at 14.3 billion. Consulting contracts exceeded that, but only by 200 contracts for a much smaller value of 745 million. Next slide, please. At the ADB, we fund a variety of sectors. Projects and spending are dominated by transport, by energy, agriculture, water, and education. However, finance, public sector management, IT, and multi-sector also feature to varying degrees. Next slide, please. So these sectors that I just described are engaged throughout the ADB developing member countries. On this map, you can see that for the year 2019, operations are the highest in Southeast, South Asia, and Central West. The total 2019 operations at 33.74 billion include all loans, grants, technical assistance, and co-financing. If you want to look into this data in more detail, I invite you to read the ADB 2019 annual report, which is available online. Next slide, please. We do have 46 borrowing member countries, and we work with the private sector, with NGOs, foundations, academia, and donors and other international organizations to extend support to our borrowers. Our biggest borrowers in 2019 were India, China, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Indonesia. Next slide, please. Great. ADB procurement includes goods, works, consulting, and non-consulting services. And you can see on this slide these areas in more detail. Can we go to the next slide, please? Great. In addition to, in the following 3 slides, I will take you quickly through the top 5 suppliers for goods, for works, and for consulting services. Now, in addition to highlighting the top suppliers in these 3 slides, I wish to point out that there is some diversity. Please go to the next slide. Great. These 5 change from year to year, and even while we can see that some of them repeat or are always on the top, there are new countries coming into the top 5 list from year to year. A close look at all 3 sectors, goods, works, and consulting services, show 9 different countries vying for spots in the top 5 in each category over the 4 years featured. On to the next slide, please. Yes, and that will be the last of the 3 consulting services. Thank you very much. Can you move to the next slide? Great. The next 3 slides feature top suppliers by contract value. Note that the amount awarded to some of these suppliers is based on 1 or more contract. Go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Being in the top 5 by value or by amount, it means something different in each of the 3 categories of goods, works, and services, and that implies different contract values. And you will no doubt see that reflected in the difference between the goods slide we just featured and the consulting, which is the next slide that I will ask to go. There we go. Great. Thank you very much. Next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in the following slides, I will discuss the ADB's procurement framework. ADB's new procurement framework came into effect in mid-2007. It has modernized our procurement processes by introducing a principles-based approach. The flexibility that can be accommodated in this new framework is meant to meet diverse needs of our clients. Now, all projects where the concept note the project concept note was approved before July 2017. From July 2017 and onward will use the new procurement framework. However, all projects for which the concept notes were approved before July 2017 will continue to follow the previous procurement guidelines. Now, having made this distinction, I wish to make it clear that our borrowers, our executing agencies can choose to apply the new procurement framework to projects that, based on their approval date, would normally fall under the previous policy. And for this to be possible, it must be discussed with ADB, particularly with the assigned project officer, and it must be indicated in the bidding documents. So an executing agency cannot, after the fact, for example, want to implement an aspect of the new procurement framework without that being taken into account in the procurement planning stage and reflected in the procurement documentation. Next slide, please. The new procurement framework introduced two new principles, that of quality and value for money. This is in addition to the long-standing principles of fairness, economy, efficiency, and transparency. Next slide, please. Now, if we take a look at roles and responsibilities, our procurement is much like that of other MDBs, where the borrower, through its executing agencies, is responsible for procuring most of the works, goods, and services. ADB's preferred option is for open competitive bidding, and we will review our procurement activities to ensure compliance with our policies. Technical and financial bid elements are designed by the executing agencies. However, they should fall within the parameters that are set by the bank in our various qualifying fields. I will add that there is some procurement that is undertaken by the ADB to support its borrowers through TA grants and as well as through staff consulting. Next slide, please. We provide several procurement documents. They are available online in template form and are listed here for you. Next slide, please. Great. I mentioned earlier that open competitive bidding is the preferred procurement method. You should note that under specific circumstances, other more appropriate methods may be used, and here we have listed these options for you. You can find more information online on all of these. Next slide, please. Great. ADB's anti-corruption policy and guidelines are not to be overlooked. These apply to all persons involved or connected to ADB financed, ADB administered, or ADB supported activities. For those of you who've done business with us before, you would have noticed several clauses from these policies incorporated into our procurement documents. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you very much. So this list provides some tips for winning ADB assignments. All of these are important. Some points here may become more prominent under certain circumstances. For instance, firms should know when it is best to partner with others in order to gain advantage. Partnering may not be necessary all the time, but you need to know when it will increase the chances of your bid being successful. Also, the nature and complexity of your project or assignment would also determine the extent and the depth of some of your preparation. Again, I emphasize that all of these points should be taken into account. Next slide, please. Now, we wish to also raise awareness on some occurrences that would undoubtedly have a negative impact on your bid, meaning that your bid would be disqualified or not be allowed to progress to the next steps in the process. If you fail to disclose a conflict of interest, if JV partners are not from ADB countries, if proposals are submitted late, if proposals fail to respond to client requirements, if your bids are conditional or incomplete or non-compliant, and also if there are any integrity violations in the bidding process, your bid will be disqualified. Next slide, please. Now, unsuccessful bidders can request debriefing from either ADB or the executing agency. Also, sometimes a bidder may wish to complain, and this may be done directly with the ADB through our online form, a link of which is provided in this slide. For reporting fraud, you may go onto our website, and we have also provided the link where you can find information on how to do so. Next slide, please. Next slide, thank you. So in the next few minutes that we have, I will be taking you through where to find opportunities on our website. This still starts on our main page. You go to adb.org and you link to Work With Us and then onto the Business Center, then follow Operational Procurement. Next slide, please. We also have a consultants register where consultants may register with the bank, but also they can search consulting opportunities. There are different spaces or platform for ADB project teams as well as executing agencies in the CMS system. Executing agencies can access consulting recruitment services, and they can also post opportunities for ADB finance projects. We encourage you to log on and to explore our CMS. Thank you. Next slide, please. Great. There's no shortage of data and information on the ADB website. If you or your team have time to be really thorough about investigating and accessing opportunities, we suggest that you go beyond just the procurement plans or procurement notices. Two interesting documents that may be used for long-term planning are the country partnership strategies, which outlines a 5-year vision and outlines prioritized sectors and projects. And second, the country operations business plans, the COBP, which details the plans year by year. All of these are public and available online, and we do invite you to have a look. Next slide, please. Great. Next slide. Thank you very much. ADB's response to COVID-19, as you would have heard mentioned in the earlier part of today's session, was swift and included all areas of ADB operations that could have responded in any manner to the pandemic. The response on the procurement side included the policy aspects where flexibility and new features were introduced. Some of these are listed here on this slide. There was also and still is an operational side where we are actively procuring COVID-19 related medical equipment on behalf of some of our DMCs. The procurement team also conducted market research to determine suppliers and their capacity to supply much needed medical equipment from PPEs to ventilators. For this, the procurement team canvassed all ADB member countries. We asked suppliers of PPEs and other medical equipment to register with us, and you heard my colleague Luke speak earlier about this registration. We've built and are still building a database of suppliers. From this database, our countries can buy directly or can buy on behalf, or the bank can buy on behalf of a country if this is requested. We urge businesses to go online and to register directly with us. Next slide, please. Now, if you look, ADB's COVID-19 page is actually quite comprehensive. If you look onto the What We Do section, you will find the COVID-19 page where you can explore all facets of the bank's COVID-19 response. And this is what that first landing page looks like. Next slide, please. Now, from the bottom of the main COVID-19 page, you can find the CMS system for consulting registration and opportunities. And you can also find procurement plans and tender notices, which would be actually very important source of information for suppliers. Next slide, please. Great. You can find a link to pages that delve into projects, tenders, and documents such as procurement plans. All of these here that I show you now are related to COVID-19. Next slide, please. Right. Again, this is just a shot of the tenders section of that same web page section. Great. You can see under the tenders tab, several tenders are currently out right now. Again, as I mentioned, this is a still with the images taken last week. However, my colleague Julian, who's up right next, will actually take you through a demo of these pages. Next slide, please. Now, just before wrapping up, I would like to share with you some of what was done by the bank. There was a regional technical assistance package of $48.3 million, which was deployed. And this slide just depicts the various stages of commitment or order or contracting and delivery of supplies of that. And next slide, please. I think we are wrapping up. I have only Great. This slide just again shares more information on ADB's COVID-19 response, and you will see there is a web link provided to the $20 billion package that was provided earlier. So if you have time and you want to take a look, you can go ahead. Next slide, please. We invite you to subscribe if you want more information on our COVID-19 policy as well as our response to COVID-19, and the links are here embedded in this page. And next slide, please. Thank you. So if you want more information on any of our procurement systems, procedures, or documents, we invite you to link onto this. And with that last slide, I thank you very much for listening to me, and I hand over back to the moderator. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Charlene. And perhaps to reiterate, all the material that we're going through today will be available online. Charlene obviously covered some rather technical information on how to do business with ADB, and we'll be sure to make that available to you as our audience. Our next speaker is Mr. Julian Doxey, who is a procurement specialist at ADB with over 10 years of experience in procurement, anti-corruption, water management, and climate change. 4 of those years have been here at the bank. Prior to ADB, Julian worked in the UK with a development consulting firm and a research think tank. So now, over to Julian to talk about the changes on the PPFD website.
Thanks very much, Luke. Good day, everyone. Hope the sound is okay. If it is, okay, great. So I'll just spend 5 minutes with you today showing you the actual ADB website. And you can start off with adb.org. As you can see on my screen here. And when you're at this page, this is really, the ADB website is really a very huge source of information for us. I mean, almost everything we do is available. Where we work, etc. But a good place to start is up here with the Work With Us tab. Okay, so as Charlene pointed out, if you come here to the tab, which if you click on the Business Center, first thing we see is, just a moment, please. We get the business is a list of so how can I become a consultant? How can my company consult with ADB? So these are helpful resources for you to get a sort of quick introduction to how ADB works and some of our key questions for you here. Okay. Over here on the right-hand side of the screen, you also see our new digital assistant, which we've created for you, a chat bot where you can ask questions and answers over here on the right-hand side. Okay, so this is a new feature we have here that can help you also with some of your questions on doing business with ADB. So the next page I'd like to show you is right here on the top, called the we click through that, and I do have some comments saying that the screen is a bit blurry. Please rest assured that I also have this on PowerPoint slides for you. Procurement page. And on this page, you can find our live opportunities for goods and works, and also for our consulting services. For example, the latest procurement notices, the pre-qualified applicants and awarded contracts for goods and works, and most you will see all of the active tenders going on for any particular project underway. So for example, planned tenders for this project. Okay, so there's a lot of good information for you. The similar page, if you go from the click on consulting services, you will also see this under consulting. Sorry, I'm just receiving some more feedback that it's Martin, does that help?
Hard to tell.
So we're here on the we're here on the consulting page, and again you can see, and this will be a bit of a challenge because again this is a live website demo, but do bear with us, and we do have slides coming afterwards. Look, you can see the latest opportunities here on the consulting page, our latest guidelines and reference guides from our consulting selections, and again procurement plans, contracts awarded, lists of shortlisted firms, where you can again find out more information. Now, if we go back to the operational procurement page and keep scrolling down, again, we're still here at operational procurement. And if we keep scrolling down, we have a button on institutional procurement. Okay, and that means opportunities for supplying goods and services to ADB's headquarters and its field offices. For example, office supplies or IT help desk or these kinds of things. If you're interested in these kinds of opportunities, click right here and you will find those kinds of opportunities for you. Likewise, right below it, we have a link to our COVID response page. Okay, this is what Charlene was talking about in her presentation. And if you click on this, you are taken to this page, and here you will find all of our active COVID-19 related business knowledge and outreach and opportunities for you. So for example, if you are a vaccine cold chain specialist, there is a live opportunity for you right here to which you could apply. Okay. Now, if we go back to the operational procurement page again, there's one more thing I'd like to show you there. And that is there's plenty of other things on this page, guidelines, and if you have complaints, you can submit them here. But most importantly is this one right here, projects and tenders. And I've been sending this to many of you through the Q&A chat box, okay? This is probably the most important page on the ADB website. And if you click on it, and you can also access it at the top of the page, just for reference as well, okay? You can also access it right here. If you click on that, you end up right here, okay? And this will load for you in a moment. And this is, again, probably the most important page on ADB's website, because here you can search all of our projects, all of our tenders, and all relevant documents related to our projects, by country, by sector, by type, by year, etc. There are a lot of useful filters here for you to narrow down your search, because as you can see, for example, we have 20,000 active tenders right now, or archived tenders available on our website for you to search through. A lot of business intelligence here, okay? And for example, I'll just show you, I did a quick search here for Indonesia, energy sector, consulting firm opportunities, okay? And I found 13 hits. So this is how you can help narrow down your search. And you can see also one live opportunity here for a project management consultant with a deadline of November 3rd. So again, this is a very important page, and we do encourage you to spend quite a bit of time on it. Finally, I just want to show you a new page we've built, which Stefan was alluding to as well in his presentation. And this is a page that now summarizes all of our business outreach activities that we do in ADB, such as the one that you're currently listening to today. So on this new page, you'll see all of the past and upcoming events that we have going on for business outreach. And we've also got sub-pages here that you can find out more information about our annual Business Opportunities Fair, which we were, until the pandemic started, we were holding every year in our headquarters, and also our Business Opportunities Seminars and other outreach events, such as this one, okay? So by going into these sub-pages, which I can show you here quickly, you will find more information about these types of outreach events that we do, and you will also be able to access archived materials, okay? And these archived materials will include the materials from today's event. They will go up here as well. So you'll be able to download all of the PowerPoint presentations, you'll see images, etc. And you can see here, for example, an events calendar showing upcoming and past events. And down here at the bottom, you see the link to archived materials. And if you click on this link to archived materials, then you end up at this offsite page where all PowerPoints, images, agendas, programs, you name it, are uploaded here for your downloading and learning convenience, okay? So my very last point, as I'm out of time, is just on the bottom of every ADB page, okay, there is a button called Subscriber Services. And this is very useful for you. If you click on it, you will end up here. And this is a place where you can put in your email address and get daily emails for website updates, okay? So you can be updated on our latest procurement notices, on our latest business center materials, project information, and this will help you stay up to date without having to constantly visit the ADB website. Okay, and so I do encourage you to sign up for this, and I also encourage you to visit us on our ADB Business Center LinkedIn page. Sign up for LinkedIn if you're not on it already, and follow us there, and you'll also see our key procurement notices and other relevant business information for you there. So I hope that was helpful for you. And again, there will be slides of what I just showed you circulated after the end of the event in case you did have trouble seeing the website because of bandwidth issues or anything like that. And I'll now go back to answering your questions in the Q&A box. So thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for that, Julian. The ADB website is certainly a wealth of information and transparency, and lots of good changes. So we definitely encourage everyone in the audience to go take a look themselves. Plenty of information there. Our next panel, as I said before, is with the Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department. But before we get to that, we want to cue a video to showcase the great work that ADB has done in procuring and delivering supplies to countries affected by COVID-19.
Okay, Shanu.
So please, cue video.
We follow a rigorous and competitive process in choosing suppliers that can provide quality products and services. We have contracted with companies from around the world, including medium-sized companies from developing member countries. We have also contracted partner organizations that can provide logistics and quality control.
Okay. All right, everyone. As I said before, here we go with our SDCC panel. The discussion will be around Strategy 2030 in ADB's response to COVID-19 in health and other sectors as well. Let me introduce first our 4 panelists. So we have Manoj Sharma, who is chief of ADB's urban sector. He is leading ADB's efforts on making cities more livable, following a cross-sector and cross-thematic approach for providing integrated solutions. Manoj has 28 years of experience working with ADB and the government of India. He has led multi-sector teams for designing and implementing complex and innovative projects for urban infrastructure and economic corridor development in several countries in Asia. He also has supported the strategic development of the urban, water, and industrial sectors while at the bank. Our next panelist, Mr. Tom Pinello, Chief of SDCC's Water Sector Group and leads policy, knowledge, and portfolio innovation. With a career spanning for more than 17 years at ADB, he has led water operations in Central, South, and Southeast Asia, including postings in Indonesia and Uzbekistan. Mr. Pinello also served as ADB's country director in Afghanistan, no doubt a challenging position. Prior to ADB, he worked at the World Bank as a water resources management specialist. Next, our panelist, Dr. Yongping Zhai, has been working on energy development in Asia and Africa for more than 25 years. Mr. Zhai has 12 years of experience at ADB and is currently Chief of the Energy Sector Group within SDCC. In this role, Mr. Zhai is in charge of overall policy coordination and technical support to ADB energy sector operations. He also served as an assistant professor at the Energy Technology Division, Asian Institute of Technology in Bangkok, Thailand. Our last panelist within SDCC is Dr. Eduardo Banzon, who is a principal health specialist at ADB, where he's been working for the past 6 years. Prior to ADB, he was regional advisor to the World Health Organization for health financing for the Eastern Mediterranean region and WHO health economist in Bangladesh. He was also president and CEO of the Philippine Health Insurance Corporation, World Bank Senior Health Specialist for the East Asia and the Pacific region, as well as a faculty member of the University of the Philippines College of Medicine and the Ateneo Graduate School of Business. So please, those in the audience, join me in welcoming our SDCC colleagues and panelists to talk through some very interesting topics this afternoon. Okay, so maybe Yongping, I'll ask you to kick it off and give us some insights into the energy sector. Firstly, could you remind us about the situation for energy projects in ADB regarding sustainable development goals in respect to the Paris Agreement? And how has COVID-19 been an impact, and what has been the energy sector's response?
Sure. Thank you, Luke. I will start presenting some update from the energy sector. Actually, prior to the pandemic, the energy sector of ADB operations and the whole Asia in general, we were well on track in meeting the 100% of electrification in the region, in Asia and the Pacific. So we were on the right track, and ADB contributed to this progress by lending about $5 billion per year in the sector, of which half of that $5 billion goes to renewable energy efficiency, and the other half goes to transmission lines that will help to integrate the renewable energy into the system. So that's the situation just prior to the pandemic. Since March this year, we have started to see how ADB energy sector will contribute to this pandemic response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And specifically, we made sure that the energy sector will continue to support the business, let's say as usual within quote, so that we can continue our work with power supply and in using more and more renewable energy. What we realize is that during the pandemic, the renewable energy, the share of renewable energy has increased because renewable energy does not depend on a long supply chain, mostly relying on local resources, sunshine and wind in the country. So in a way, renewable energy has shown resilience to the pandemic, and we want to encourage and do more of such investment in the future moving forward. and also specifically supporting our countries, because some companies have suffered cash flow problem because of during the pandemic, the collection of revenue has an issue. There are also lower demand in some areas, so that the power companies, some of them are suffering from a cash flow problem. So ADB provided emergency support to some of these companies so that they can continue their business during this difficult time. And lastly, I would like to also mention that we have considered, Dodo is here from health sector, so there is a perceived risk of virus transmission under the centralized air condition in public buildings. So ADB provided regional support in studying, assessing this risk and providing technical solutions. Thank you. Back to you, Luke.
Thank you, Yongping. That's a very interesting comment about the central air being a health concern. In fact, let's now turn over to Dodo for some inputs from the health sector. Well, first of all, maybe just to get it general, Dodo, what are the health challenges in Asia and the Pacific?
Thanks, Luke. So I think what's interesting is that what we have seen is that Asia really has become more healthy prior to COVID. And we have seen life expectancy increase. We have seen a change in the kind of illnesses that Asians were having. So from a communicable disease, we were controlling it so well. And our problem became, in a sense, became more of non-communicable disease, people getting old, aging, and that was the focus of that we were trying to address. Countries in Asia, because of instance, became more ambitious. They were now talking of universal health coverage, really making sure that all of their population would address. During all of these times, there was a recognition, of course, that the possibility of an pandemic coming out of Asia was always there. Historically, a lot of past pandemics came out of Asia. So COVID came, and it has been quite a challenge. So we have seen Asia respond differently. There have been Asian countries that have really done well, really responding and managed the COVID. There are Asian countries that unfortunately the weaknesses that they have in their health system has been sort of aggravated or compounded by COVID. Nonetheless, when ADB has been responding to that in all of our countries, in addition to our support, of course, to making sure that that are specific to health systems, we are also providing support to make sure that countries can manage the health effects of the interventions. So it's been a challenge, and I don't know, probably before now the challenge we have is vaccines, but probably we'll talk about it later. Luke, over.
Sure. Thanks, Dodo. I appreciate that. Did you want to pick up on the point raised by Yongping around the central air and what ADB did to look into that particular issue?
Okay. That's quite interesting, because when the virus initially came, people actually thought that you need to be really near somebody else to get the infection. Then we started realizing that closed spaces, which we will have if in air-conditioned rooms, right? That means poor ventilation, could actually increase the risk of your infection. So and Asia is, remember, lots of Asia is tropical. Okay, sure. Somebody actually said that air conditioning made Asia. So now, Yongping said that our energy colleagues were going to be tremendous, because it will help us provide guidance on how to deal with ventilation, with poor ventilation, and really on how to advise countries and people how to. Air conditioning is good as long as you do it well.
Yeah. Good point. Hard to live without it these days, but understand the risks are out there. Okay, thanks, Dodo. Now, maybe to Tom, and Tom's, of course, covering two sectors, the first being water. Just want to get a sense, Tom, can you provide an overview of the water sector at ADB in terms of just the types of projects and the investments, and what does that look like from a business opportunity point of view?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Luke. So water is across our portfolio, concentrated in a few areas. About half our lending traditionally has been for water supply, sanitation, and wastewater. And then the other half is split across irrigation and drainage, integrated flood risk management, water resources management, and then we have a bit in hydropower, but that's not a regular annual lending activity for us. And then the portfolio is about $2.5 to $3 billion a year, although we see a growth to about $4.5 or $5 billion annually, so it is growing. And with that growth, the other thing we see is diversification. Well, in real numbers, water supply sanitation will stay the same or increase, but we see more going into integrated flood risk management, irrigation and drainage, and I think that reflects the needs of the region, and partly with flood, partly due to climate change. So for business opportunities, we see the traditional feasibility, detailed engineering design, and construction supervision, but we also see growth in certain areas, data technology, but we'll come back to that when I talk about some of the trends in the sector. Thanks.
Thanks. Okay. That would be maybe that's a good pivot then. If you do want to talk about maybe some key innovations or trends within water.
So certainly, so data and technology for, I think, all our businesses and infrastructure, GIS, decision support systems, SCADA, wireless sensors, remote sensing. Well, this is not, new in many countries. Many of our clients are taking this up. Smart water systems. Manoj is very familiar with this. This is the standard practice these days for our urban clients, and they're really taking it forward. Another thing that's not new, but really is focus on asset management and building this into all our projects, and also building more robust systems that require less asset management, less costs. So as a contractor or a designer, if you can give us systems that minimize life cycle costs, that's a big emphasis for us. Innovative financing and transactions, design, build, operate, these types of things, and while not necessarily a technology or a design, they do offer some interesting opportunities for contractors who can get into these types of things of building capacity, as well as managing, as well as building in a turnkey operation. And lastly, I just want to mention kind of nature-based solutions. That's a new direction for us, and a combination of both gray and green infrastructure. And again, the other thing I want to mention is climate change, and that's not a medium or long term. That's here, that's now, and that will affect our entire water portfolio. So climate adaptation is here, and the water sector is responsible for over 60% of ADB's climate adaptation financing. I'll stop there, Luke.
Thanks, Tom. Some good points, really. This whole idea of minimizing life cycle costing, that's important for industry to understand how important it is for ADB in consideration for our projects, and also design, build, operate, and looking for companies that can execute those types of projects. Okay, so you did mention Manoj in the urban sector, so maybe we can get some input from him here, put him on the spot for a second. So Manoj, what are the issues and challenges that cities in the ADB region are facing, and how would you say that's changed in light of COVID-19?
Thank you, Luke. Urbanization, as we all know, especially in developing countries, is one of the most significant global trends. And if I may say, it's going to define the future. In ADB's developing member countries in Asia and the Pacific, most cities face inadequate urban services and deficits in basic urban infrastructure. Already a huge challenge before COVID-19, this lack of adequate urban services has placed outbreak-affected areas at a greater disadvantage due to disruptions in regular operations. We are also aware that rapid urbanization is often linked to improved economic opportunities, better access to health and education services, and better living conditions. But urbanization also creates resource scarcity, climate change impact, as Tom just talked about, and conflicts which results in internally displaced persons. So cities are at the forefront of COVID-19 crisis, to answer your second part. With more than 90% of COVID-19 cases occurring in cities, the impacts of the pandemic are most felt by the residents of cities. For example, without well-managed healthcare, as Dodo talked about, or medical waste management, or water services, we are going to see much adverse impact on the environment and public health of the residents. Many cities will rethink about appropriate densities or developing secondary cities in place of mega cities or metros. So I'll take a pause here. Thanks.
Okay. Well, I think it's a good segue then. So what would you say are opportunities for various stakeholders to collaborate with ADB in the urban sector? What does that look like for industry participants, be them consultants, consultancy firms, or contractors?
Okay, we've already talked about our long-term strategic framework, Strategy 2030. So ADB Strategy 2030 has identified making cities more livable as one of its important operational priorities. So this operational priority 4 sets out the direction and approach for cities to become livable. And we define livable cities as those which are green, competitive, inclusive, and resilient. This plan also supports cities to develop the right institutions, policies, and enabling environments to become more livable. This particular plan and that generates opportunities for our partners focuses on infrastructure and services, planning, financial sustainability, and governance of cities, and urban environment improvement, climate resilience, and disaster management of cities. I'm going to refer one study which we did recently. As per this study, our region needs $26.2 billion US dollars from 2016 to 2030. That translates to $1.7 trillion US dollars per year for infrastructure to maintain growth and eradicate poverty and respond to climate change. This is a huge investment need, which becomes opportunities for all of us in ADB or development partners or contractors or consultants. We have already seen the extent of opportunities in civil works, equipment, and consulting services in various sectors. Suffice to say that urban sector is the fastest growing sector in terms of the opportunities in all 3 types of contracts. Yeah,
okay.
I will take up.
Thanks, Manoj. Appreciate that follow-on response. Okay, you know, we had a really interesting question come in from the audience, so I just want to ask that. I think it's probably maybe a joint response between Dodo and Tom. And Tom, it's on the transport side. But so the poor in rural areas need ready access to health services, right? That's pretty obvious. And there is a linking between health and transport sectors to achieve this. Does that exist? In which country has been most successful in, and what factors have been key drivers to that success? So, I don't know, Tom or Dodo, do you want to try to take this one on? The idea is the poor in rural areas need access to healthcare services, but obviously transport linkages are often not there. So is there something being done around that within ADB, and are there any countries specifically that have been successful in tackling that issue?
Okay. Luke. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. So yes, you know, that's the access, geographical access to healthcare services is always been a problem, particularly in rural areas. So our transport team, we don't have James here right now, but we know that ADB has invested substantially in significantly in expanding access of rural communities to rural communities, and not to population centers, where usually that's where you will find the health facilities. We have also invested in mass transportation, which also within cities. It's not just in rural areas where we have problems with geographical access. Finally, from the health side, what we have also seen is technology, and this is where COVID-19 pandemic has actually, in a sense, made sort of one of its few positive things. It has actually led to more transfer, more use, more application of health services being provided to the internet. So mHealth, telemed, all of that. A lot of the things that used to be pilot studies have now become part of a lot of country systems. And so and that would means that you don't need the road to access healthcare services. So there are a transport response. There's going to be a health response, and ADB is supporting both of them. Luke.
Okay. Well, thanks for that, Dodo. And as I think about it, I guess there's a linkage as well between energy and health. And maybe, Yongping, if you can sort of elaborate on what that might look like in the different projects that you're looking after, the linkage between access to energy and what that might look like in terms of people's health.
Yes, look, actually, one of the big lessons we learned throughout this pandemic is how sectors are interlinked, and energy should support education, transport, urban, and health. And health is very, very important point that everybody realizes under the pandemic, and this is the issue to address. And right now, we talk about dealing with the pandemic this year and next year, it's going to big thing would be the vaccine. And transporting vaccine to rural areas, remote areas, will depend on effective cold chain. And that cold chain is an energy issue, actually.
Mm-hmm.
We're thinking to develop and make use of solar energy to make sure that the cold chain can be extended to remote rural areas, in health centers in those areas. So, and this is one of the things we are going to study and make sure that this will be part of the support packages starting next year when the vaccine is available.
Okay. That's a great point, Yongping, and I think what I've read in terms of these vaccines is some of them have cold chain requirements down to -degrees°C, which is quite concerning considering many countries in developing Asia will certainly not have that type of infrastructure in place. It's interesting to think that a solar solution is being looked at because, of course, the sun is the most powerful bit of energy that we have here on Earth. So I appreciate that. Okay. Let's get a question from the transport sector. I don't think we've covered much of that yet. So, Tom, for you in the transport sector, so how has it been impacted during COVID-19, and how do you think contractors and consultants can contribute?
Yeah, thanks, Luke. Well, as you know, transport sector has been one of the most impacted sectors and is still impacted, and it's a very challenging situation for them. And it's really an unprecedented event, and there are no readily available measures in transport. So, under the circumstances, they need to follow the government travel restrictions and keep social distancing at the work site, practice proper sterilization, ensure all their people have proper PPE, and practice best practice when it comes to worker safety. But like here in the Philippines, we have quite strict regulations on quarantine, and you need to work within the guidelines, but make sure your workers are safe and do what you can. Now, in terms of public transit, it needs to keep going, and it's the most hard hit. Now, design of public transportation, it's not structurally affected, but most of the operators are practicing sterilization and keeping drivers separated from the passengers for their safety, and encouraging contactless payment, medium instead of cash. I've seen that change take place here. And future public transport is going to have inspection facilities, tracing functions, good ventilation, and all of these things built into the systems. But the systemic change has not taken place yet. But I think with this pandemic, we will see changes in anticipation of future pandemics or epidemics.
Okay, I appreciate that, Tom. That does make plenty of sense. There will be lasting change after we see the end of this COVID-19 pandemic. All right, perhaps for the education sector, I don't think we've had any inputs there. Manoj, what does the situation look like for education sector in terms of the COVID-19 crisis, and what are the priorities?
Okay, yeah, all right. Yeah, thank you, Luke. We've all seen school closures in more than 180 countries, 1.7 billion students, which is 98% of world student population, have been adversely affected. School closures and limited operations for 6 to 12 months or potentially longer add to the pre-existing shortfalls in learning. So COVID-19 has actually aggravated the existing inequities in the urban sector. And if I may say, if no actions are taken, we will see re-enrollments will fall, dropouts will rise, learning deficits will increase, and so will the inequalities, particularly to the vulnerable students. Health and safety of children will be affected, long-term setbacks to human capital development and growth, lifetime productivity gains and earnings will suffer. So we'll see a lot of adverse reactions and repercussions. And we have also seen that the focus of learning has shifted from school to home, and a lot of burden is being shared by the parents to support learners. To answer your second question on priorities, these unprecedented shocks like COVID pandemic call for aggressive actions. There are several overarching priorities on which ADB is currently working with cities and rural areas, particularly in our developing member countries. First one is to sustain uninterrupted learning, which is anytime, anywhere, through multiple channels like online or offline or hybrid, mobile apps, TV, radio, print, whatever medium is possible, the school education for children should continue.
Okay.
Second important priority is to ensure teachers' quality, including professional development. That was important pre-COVID and even now in post-COVID situation. Educational technology has become very important these days, but we have seen most of the investments going in augmented reality and virtual realities. And our developing member countries are far behind EdTech, as we call it, education technology. Just to borrow a phrase from what Ramesh said in the first session, he was quoting the ex-governor of RBI in India on 3 Rs. In education, also we use a concept of 3 Rs. The first one is to response, that is to ensure learning continuity. Second is to recovery, that is to reopen with safety precautions. And finally, rejuvenation, that is to formalize a new normal, which is a hybrid online, offline, and other kind of system which is context specific and suitable for students. ADB is taking up really several innovative examples to support our developing member countries. Thank you. Over to you.
Okay. Thanks, Manoj. In trying to keep with schedule, although we are a bit over schedule, I wanted to come back to a couple of questions raised by the audience. So here's one from Mr. Jai. Question is, you mentioned wind and solar as renewable resources in the region. Being located in the Ring of Fire, is geothermal also an area of focus? Over to you, Mr. Jai.
Yes, very good question indeed, that all sorts of renewable energy as within the scope of our support. I mentioned solar, wind, but also hydropower. And geothermal is particularly important for the region where we know that, for example, in the Philippines here, we have one of the richest resources in the world, actually. Also Indonesia. We are supporting geothermal-based power in Indonesia, and we supported in the past also the geothermal power in the Philippines. But I would say that geothermal for power is not the only geothermal technology we can consider. There are also all kinds of geothermal, low temperature geothermal resources can be used for heating purposes, like in China, for example. ADB supported the geothermal-based heating system in China. We are also considering another technology that is earth-based heat pumps, a kind of resources that we can tap through different technology for efficient heating. So geothermal technology, yes, for power, but also for other uses. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Yongping. And there's another question that came up. I guess it's specific to the health sector. So, Dodo, if you don't mind, how is ADB involved in supporting the implementation of UHC? And for those that don't know, UHC is Universal Health Coverage across Asia, and what are current needs from different Asian nations when it comes to UHC? Over to you.
Thanks, Luke. So, okay, one of the first, this year we have actually organized a meeting between health and finance ministers on the side of the ADB annual meeting, where we were talking about sustainable financing for UHC. So one of the things that we talk when we talk about UHC is really making sure there's enough more money is put into health. And ADB would supports a lot of our countries argue the case or mobilize the financing or do the necessary financing reforms in the way they finance healthcare, the way they pay their doctors, the way they pay their hospitals. And this, our support would be the nature of either technical advice or in the nature of, if they have adopted specific financing reforms, we could help finance that. But it's not just about money. It's also making sure that you become more efficient in the way you deliver health services. And the financing is actually connected to that. So we also support health service delivery reforms, whether it's a shifting from, let's say, countries now addressing non-communicable disease, taking care of chronic care, moving away from design of their health systems, which is like designed for problems 50 years ago into the problems of now, health takes a long time to move. So we do also projects on that. So there's a whole range of UHC interventions that we support in Asia and the Pacific. Over.
Okay. Thanks for that, Dodo. I know we're getting so many questions from the audience. I feel like we could continue this discussion for the entire evening, but unfortunately we have to keep the schedule. Going to close this down with thanks really for all of our STCC participants. You all have been great and have addressed some very interesting and pertinent issues in light of COVID-19, and also just the general work that ADB does across our different portfolios. Just a message for the audience. So all of you that have registered, we have your email address, of course, and we'll be sending across a survey. That'll come to you within the next day or so. Please do respond to the survey. These events that we put together, they're for our industry stakeholders and others that dial in for them. So we want to make sure that they're fit for purpose and they meet your needs. This is all from me, so thank you very much for listening in. And to provide our closing remarks, I'll now turn it over to a great colleague and mentor, Mr. Ashraf Mohammed, who is Deputy Director is Deputy Director General of our Procurement, Portfolio, and Financial Management Division here at ADB. He has 16 years of experience and was previously Assistant General Counsel in ADB's legal department, where he was responsible for procurement oversight. He has held a number of senior roles in ADB and also in private sector legal practice in London. Over to you, Ashraf.
Thank you, Luke.
Thank you.
Great. And thank you very much, and hello, everybody. And congratulations to all the participants who are still with us. I'm sure there's many of us actually who are there. You've gone through 3 hours, almost 3 hours of a huge amount of information, and you're still interested for more, so well done. I'm not going to take too much of your time. I know it's getting late in many of the places that you are currently. Some of you might know that during the last 10 years, ADB annually organized business opportunities fairs in Manila as forums for consultants, contractors, manufacturers, suppliers, and civil society organizations interested in providing goods, works, and consulting and non-consulting services for ADB projects. Our original intention, actually, after last year's very successful business opportunities fairs, was to actually move it out of Manila, where it'd been for the last 10 years, and to go to our DMCs, to our developing member countries, and hold a fair 1 year in one of our countries, and then bring it back to Manila in alternative years. It's funny how fortune works, because we weren't able actually to go to the country that we had decided upon in Central and West Asia in 2020 for obvious reasons, but we were still able to actually take the event out of Manila by holding it virtually today. So anyway, we got there somehow. Our aim continues to be meaningful and mutual beneficial engagement with consultants, contractors and suppliers and other interested parties despite of COVID-19. It's appreciated that a lot of information was provided today, and as was stated, all the presentations will be made available to all participants. But I would very much echo Julian's point made earlier, that you should really visit the ADB website to find out more about what ADB is doing and what opportunities could be open for you. The website will provide you with a whole host of tools, information that will be very, very useful in your endeavors to work, either start working with ADB for the first time or continue and expand your opportunities with ADB. I'd also like to emphasize that ADB relies very much on our business partners in project preparation and implementation, and in supporting our client countries in many aspects, including developing strategic approaches to different challenges such as the COVID pandemic, capacity building and improving countries' resilience to different types of natural mandate disasters. Let me now also take this opportunity to thank all the speakers for their reflections and active participation today. Special thanks, of course, to our external panelists, Ms. Raina Mohideen, Principal Advisor for Nozzle Institute for Global Health, Mr. Teksim Khan, the CEO of Dhaka Water Supply Authority, and Ms. Annalise Averill, the Senior Vice President for Suez. Thank you for sharing your experiences on how different institutions are adapting to COVID-19, the implementation of ADB finance projects, including health and safety measures, and how COVID-19 response strategies should be formulated going forward. This is extremely useful information and feedback as it comes from real practitioners like yourselves, and we can learn more and share experiences with our client countries. I would also like to take this opportunity of thanking ADB colleagues from other departments for their support for this event. Particularly want to thank the ADB speakers today, and of course our Department of Communication for their hard work and innovative work on the new Business Opportunities website and the videos that you saw today and are on the website. I hope you found this forum useful. It's provided you with tools to start your contribution or to continue with your contribution with ADB Finance projects. ADB very much values your continued collaboration, and we hope to enhance that collaboration even further in these challenging times. We hope that with our joint efforts, we will be able to make greater contributions to improving the livelihoods of millions of people across Asia and the Pacific, and especially in these very challenging times. Let me just say thank you very much for your participation today in this event, and wishing you all the best. Keep healthy and keep safe. Thank you.
The Vietnamese government is supporting the fight against COVID-19 in multiple ways. During the COVID-19 pandemic, across Vietnam, the water utility companies assured safe access to clean water and sanitation, as well as sustained control of water quality.
Chúng tôi ý thức được cái vai trò rất là quan trọng của thiết yếu về cấp nước sạch đối với cái sức khỏe của người dân, đặc biệt là trong dịch bệnh. Đồng thời chúng tôi duy trì cái cấp nước an toàn, liên tục, áp lực cao và chất lượng nước tốt và dịch vụ hoàn hảo. Tất cả sự cố xảy ra thì chúng tôi đều đáp ứng rất là kịp thời. Và chúng tôi làm 4 cái buồng khử khuẩn tự động, và đồng thời chúng tôi cũng lấy cái công thức mà sát khuẩn đấy của từ hú đấy, thì chúng tôi chế 5.000 cái lít rửa tay tự động. Và đồng thời chúng tôi cũng cấp nước miễn phí, cấp cái nước uống đóng chai và bình miễn phí cho cả trung tâm là cách ly trên 10.000 người.
The COVID-19 pandemic put pressure on the need for speeding up the use of smart digital solutions in the water companies. In Hue, the water company used posters with simple messages to encourage people to use mobile payment for water services.
Chúng tôi luôn khuyến khích về cái thương mại điện tử. Huế Coco thì phải đi đầu. Từ năm 2015 chúng tôi đã làm hóa đơn điện tử rồi. Nhưng mà người khách hàng họ nhận thức cũng từng bước. Thì đến năm 2019 thì chỉ có 22%. Nhưng mà khi mà dịch bệnh ra thì chúng tôi định những cái thông tin đó, thì người khách hàng họ cũng ý thức rằng nếu mà tiếp xúc trực tiếp thì dễ có cái nguy cơ về gây bệnh tật. Thì chúng tôi cũng lợi dụng đấy, biến cái nguy cơ là thành thời cơ để chúng tôi nâng lên cái tỷ lệ thanh toán qua hóa đơn điện tử là 38%. Rất cảm ơn ADB đã cho chúng tôi là thứ nhất là đã viện trợ không hoàn lại cho chúng tôi quy hoạch một hệ thống cấp nước toàn tỉnh không phân biệt đô thị và nông thôn từ năm 2008.
Way Water Utility Company has been working on safer water supply and better access to sanitation for the public for decades. With the assistance of an ADB loan, UWACO has been upgrading and expanding the provincial water supply system to ensure water security and safe water supply for over 95% of the province's population by 2020. The use of digital technology in Way fits well with our approach to support client cities to enhance their planning, service delivery and financial management. We are fortunate to have partnered with the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade to establish the ASEAN Australia Smart Cities Trust Fund. The Trust Fund supports activities aligned with ADB Strategy 2030, its sustainable focus on livable cities and the ASEAN Sustainable Urbanisation Strategy. Through the Trust Fund, we will continue to support smart city development in cities such as Way across the Asia-Pacific region.